Hello, Neogenians. Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today, we are talking about something very important. Lately, on my channel, we've been talking a lot about Christ, as usual, but also the Antichrist. And we're going to do an even deeper dive onto what this actually means, because I think there's a very big misunderstanding of what Christ and the Antichrist actually represent and how this war has been raging, and you are in the middle of it. We're going to be taking a look at the difference between Christ and Christ consciousness and the Antichrist and Antichrist consciousness. It's going to be really good. This is very important because these forces are all around you trying to pull you down into a lower false form of awareness. So we're going to get right into it. But as always, my friends, I want to remind you, this is not a channel. We are a war of the mind. We are a revolution of consciousness here to make higher awareness go viral. And we are reaching millions every month. So make sure you hit like, subscribe, and share, and spread this like fire. They tried to burn the heretics down with fire. Now that same force is coming back to burn their whole system down to the ground so we can start a new, beautiful form of consciousness and unity instead of this world of division and separation. So hit share, like, subscribe. I appreciate it. If you want to help out even more, become a member. You can become a member here on YouTube or Patreon, and you get access to a lot of great stuff like members-only videos. There are hundreds of them by now. And you can also check out free downloads on inner transformation for members. You get Kabbalah, alchemy, rituals. There's a lot of great stuff there. Tarot. Or no, maybe not tarot, but Kabbalah, alchemy, all that. There's good stuff. Check it out. And it helps out the channel. You can also help out by checking out my books. I'm a Neogenian. I've written a 5-part series on the Neogenian system. And if you're looking for a free way to support, I got you, my friend. All you got to do is follow me on Spotify right now, because it's free. Don't have to pay a dime, and it helps out a lot. We're starting to blaze over there too, reaching an entirely new audience on Spotify. So I appreciate it. It helps. So make sure that you take a look at the description of this video. Links to all of those things, including my Spotify channel and books and membership, they are in the description of this video. But enough of that. Let's get into the topic. Christ versus the Antichrist. Christ consciousness versus Antichrist consciousness. So let's just start talking about the part that probably most people on my channel are familiar with. But if you're new to this, let's remind ourselves what this means. Christ represents inner awakening. So Christ is in all of us as an aspect of ourselves, as the capacity to wake up. Okay? Now, Jesus was a man. He was a guy. Jesus looked within and had an inner awakening and thus became a Christ. And each and every one of us can look within, experience an inner awakening, and become a Christ. That's available to each and every one of you that will put in the work to do. And so when we have this understanding, hold on, let me minimize my notifications real quick. Okay, so when we have this understanding, we see that Christ represents inner awakening, and Jesus was a guy. He looked inside, he woke up, and he is the Christ, a Christ, and so are all of we who do the same thing. That's why in the Gospel of Philip, which is a Gnostic text, it says that when you understand the hidden teachings, you are no longer a Christian, but a Christ. Jesus also said this. It's all over Gnostic texts. Jesus says, when you drink from my mouth, meaning understand his words, you will become like him and he will become like you, and all hidden things will be revealed to you. So this is a very common theme in Gnosticism, that you can be like Christ. And in terms of Jesus, you can go beyond Jesus. You can be more aware, more conscious than Jesus. So now we understand a little bit about Jesus and a little bit about Christ. What is Christ consciousness? Well, Christ consciousness is the kind of consciousness that we develop when we have an inner awakening. In the Neogenian system, to be precise, what this means isn't something vague, but it's very specific. It is the development of a new structure in the psyche. Let me explain it like this. When human beings became self-aware, aware of themselves, being able to say, oh, I exist. I'm an I. I am separate from you. I am separate from my environment. That occurred because a structure in the psyche was developed called the analog I, also known as the ego. So the ego is not a bad thing. It can be a bad thing. But if you actually destroyed your ego, like a lot of spiritual systems say to do, if you actually destroyed your ego, you would go back to an instinctual animal. You would be run by your instincts. So the ego is not necessarily bad. It's when it thinks that it is the true self is when it gets out of control, or if it becomes inflated, then it can get, but on itself, it's not bad. So the analog I, or ego, is what developed in humanity as a structure of the psyche that allowed them to become self-aware. This is the level that the vast majority of humans operate on today. And not even a highly developed analog I, a very low developed analog I. So they are at they are self-aware, but a very low form of self-awareness. Self-awareness has very dramatically different degrees of development. Most humans are at a very low state of self-awareness. Okay, so with that understood, what is Christ consciousness? Christ consciousness is what we call in the Neogenian system all awareness. And it happens when a structure is developed in the psyche called the analog all. And what the analog all does is allow a human, instead of seeing things in terms of separateness, allows humans to see how all things connect together. So even though in a certain sense I might be separate from you, that's a very, not actually. Actually, yes, I am I and you are you, but we are all connected into an interconnected framework. And in that sense, we are all aspects of the one expressing itself through various forms, but we are individual minds, individual souls, but we exist within in a network. So when the analog all develops in the psyche, in the Neogenian system, this is when a human gains all awareness. In terms of more Gnostic terminology, this is where one gains Christ consciousness. That's what Christ consciousness is. Now, in the Neogenian system, we also have hyper-awareness, but that's a whole nother topic. That's a very highly advanced form of all-awareness, or an advanced form of Christ consciousness. But we don't really need to talk about that today. Just understand what this form of higher consciousness is, and that it's not ill-defined. It is literally the development of a new structure in the psyche, which is a mental model of reality itself, and allows us to understand our interconnectedness. Now, this is incredibly important. And the reason why this is incredibly important, we're going to get to the Antichrist and Antichrist consciousness in a second, but the reason why that this is incredibly important is because take a look at the world today. If you look at the world today, it is based not on all awareness, it is based on self-awareness. And what does self-awareness do? It divides and separates. You go, oh, I am separate from the environment. I am separate from you. So what happens? Well, often this without the understanding of connectedness and only separateness, you see the other as a threat, as an enemy. Oh, the other has a religion that's different than mine, or comes from a country that's not from my country, or whatever it is. You see the other as a threat. And then when it comes to the environment, you see the environment as a resource to be exploited. Because if everything is separate, why not? So our world is run on simple self-awareness, which causes division. We can build an entirely new world, but we cannot do that until a large number, a significant percentage of human beings have achieved all awareness. Until then, it is literally not possible. You can pass certain laws and reformations, and you can make progress here or there, but real, long-term, sustainable progress towards unity will not and cannot occur until there's a new form of consciousness. That's why I do what I do. And you don't often see me getting into like the nitty-gritty of different political things going on, even though I think those things are very important. The reason why I don't talk on those things too much is because my goal is to get humanity to the next stage of consciousness so that we can have a whole new world. It's kind of like if a boat, it's a leaky boat, you try and plug one hole and 3 others spring up. So instead of my channel being about how to plug holes in a sinking boat, it's like how to build an entirely new boat. Kind of. Pretty much. It's not the best analogy, but hopefully you get what I mean. So my point is that think about humanity when they were not self-aware. Or think about animals. For the most part, animals they're mostly instinctual. Some advanced animals have a degree of self-awareness, absolutely, sure. But it's not highly developed like humans. It's not highly developed like humans. So you can think of animals that are mostly instinctual. Now, their animals are awesome. I love animals. I'm vegan. And I think animals are extremely important, but they have limitations. Animals can't get together and create governments and institutions. They don't have the awareness to be able to do that. It is only when a species develops self-awareness to a sufficient degree that things like governments and institutions can be created. Now, the important thing to understand about that is to create a unified world in the Neogenian system, what we call a teleocratic planetary civilization. It just comes from the word telos, which means goal. So a goal or purpose-oriented unified world. In order to create that, humans literally cannot do that if they are simply self-aware. Just like animals, instinctual animals, cannot create governments and institutions, self-aware human beings cannot create a united world that is based on true progress in terms of human actualization, potential, enjoyment of life, quality of life, things like that. They literally can't. They're too divided. It's only when the analog all develops and someone becomes all aware or Christ conscious, and that is activated among a high percentage or a significant percentage of, not a high, let's say a significant percentage of humans. Only then can we begin to construct a teleocratic planetary civilization, a new world, because you literally have to have this structure in the psyche that allows you to see how things are connected. Because when you see that things are connected, you no longer see the other as an inherent threat. You see them as a different perspective or reflection of you. And instead of like, oh, how do I eliminate the infidel? You become like, how do we understand each other better and cooperate? Same thing with the environment. Instead of looking at the environment as a resource to be exploited, you realize that we exist in this symbiotic relationship with the earth, and what we can do can ultimately cause damage to ourselves and each other in a very significant way, in a potentially world collapsing way. So all awareness, humans with simple self-awareness cannot do this to a sufficient degree to establish a world civilization, a planetary civilization like that. So it requires this new stage of of consciousness, which is what my channel is all about, which is why I talk about this stuff so much, and which why I say this channel is about making higher consciousness go viral, because that's the point. That's what we need for humanity to reach the next level of existence, the next stage of consciousness. And so you can access this. You can have this Christ consciousness. You can become a Christ. You can have all awareness. You don't have to go sit on a mountaintop and meditate for 30 years and give up all your clothes. And no, you don't have to do that. It's difficult, but it's not super hard. It's like anything. If you want to be able to lift heavy weights, you have to train. It's not impossible. It's difficult. But if you want, let's say you wanted to learn philosophy or science, well, you'd have to take classes. You're just not born. You just pop out of the womb and suddenly you can do math and philosophy, but you can work your way up to it. So same thing with higher consciousness. You have the power to activate that and develop that within you. You don't have to go, spend 30 years on a mountaintop by yourself, but you just need to put in some amount of work to begin to move in that direction, even if you start off small, like lifting very, very light weights and then moving on to higher weights, etc., until you reach your goal. So this is why the concept of Christ consciousness is so important. So in the Neogenian system, we would say that we want humanity to reach all awareness so that we can build a teleocratic planetary civilization. In terms of Gnostic talk, we would more say something like, we want humanity to achieve Christ consciousness so we can build the kingdom of heaven on earth. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says that the kingdom is right in front of you, but you don't see it. He also says it's within you. It's within you and all around you. It's right in front of your face, he says. But you can't see it. That's because you can't see it because you don't have Christ consciousness yet. Not you specifically, maybe you do, but I'm just talking about humanity, who Jesus is speaking to, the ignorant masses. They don't have Christ consciousness, so they cannot see the kingdom of heaven. When you achieve all awareness or Christ consciousness, you understand how to build the kingdom of heaven. It's in your mind, you understand it, and then you can actualize it into reality, develop it. Because everything starts out as an idea in the mind. Everything starts out as an idea in the mind, and then we put those thoughts into actions and create things like governments and institutions and schools and all those things. And same thing with all awareness and Christ consciousness. They are about building up to that level of awareness where you can have the conscious capacity to see the big picture, to see the kingdom of heaven spread out before you and make it happen, build that planetary civilization. So I'm using some terms of Gnosticism and some terms of the Neogenian system, but you can see that there's a lot of overlap here, a lot of similar concepts. So with that in mind, let's talk about the Antichrist and Antichrist consciousness. So what the Antichrist essentially represents is a perversion or twisted form of consciousness. And Antichrist consciousness is, of course, what you develop when you tune into that Antichrist pattern. So let me give you some examples. And so I'm going to read some verses from a Gnostic text called The Concept of Our Great Power. It's a cool one. And basically they talk about this. They say that, okay, there's this guy, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but they say, hey, there's this guy named Jesus walking around and he's waking people up. And the archons are like, okay, we can't have that. So what are we going to do? We're going to make a figure called the Archon of the West arrive and imitate Jesus and confuse the masses. The Gospel of Judas says something very similar. In the Gospel of Judas, Jesus tells the disciples, you guys are evil and are going to lead people astray and do it in my name. So they are going to promote a false version of consciousness that's not just a false version of consciousness, it's a twisted version of a true message. It's a lie, but it's a distortion. It disguises itself as truth. It might even use the name Jesus and use the name Christ. That's what an Antichrist figure does. You might even say that the Antichrist figure would sell Bibles and slap their name right on it. So the Antichrist consciousness, it is a pattern, but that pattern can be developed and transmitted through an individual. Like Jesus tapped into the Christ, had an inner awakening, became the Christ, and then transmitted Christ consciousness through his teachings. Someone else, like let's say a certain president, can tap into the Antichrist pattern and promote a Antichrist consciousness. And so the Antichrist is not really about a single person. It's about a force, just like Christ isn't about a single person. It's about a force. And Jesus was a guy who used and activated and transmitted that force. But it could be many different people. We can all become Christs. We can all become Antichrists as well. And we can or fall for the Antichrist pattern and have, instead of Christ consciousness, Antichrist consciousness. So it's not about one figure. It's not about just like, oh, Jesus is Christ and Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Jesus became a Christ and Trump became an Antichrist, but there can be many Antichrists, just as there can be many Christs. And so what the archons did in the concept of our great power is they sent in an archon that is an Antichrist figure called the Archon of the West. The West is where the sun sets, where light goes to die. The East is the rising of the sun, where it eliminates the darkness and rises in the sky and illuminates the earth. And the West is the setting of the sun and is therefore associated with darkness. So there's the Archon of the West, endarkened consciousness, not enlightened consciousness, but endarkened consciousness. And it says this, it says, then the Archon of the Western regions arose, and from the East he will perform a work. So he's from the West, from darkness, but he's going to perform works in the East. He is darkness pretending to be light. And he will instruct men in his wickedness. And he wants to nullify all teaching, the words of true wisdom, while loving the lying wisdom. So you'll see, the Archon of the West, this Antichrist figure, will pretend to be light, pretend that they're in the East when they're from the West, instruct people in wickedness, nullify all teaching and words of wisdom, true wisdom. But notice that it's not just lies, it's lying wisdom. It's false wisdom. It's not a blatant, obvious lie. It's wisdom that's been twisted and perverted into a lie. It's something that looks like wisdom, but isn't. It's like having a bottle of medicine that's, got pills for antibiotics or whatever, but it's actually poison. But it's in the bottle of something that's supposed to be healing, but it's actually poisonous. Something kind of like that. So it says the Archon came with the Archons of the Western regions to the East, the place where the Logos at first appeared. The Logos is often identified as Christ, and the Logos means word or reason. It's reason, it is truth, it is light. So the Archon of the West went to the East where the Logos first appeared. So, and then the earth trembled and the cities were troubled. So goes goes to where the light appeared and gives a false version of enlightenment that is actually endarkenment. So he goes to where light is, twists it, presents it as light, though it is darkness. And so it says, then the time came. So think about it like if we're talking about it in myth, story form in terms of like Jesus Christ and the Antichrist, then this Archon of the West, this Antichrist figure, by going to where the light appeared, Christ, and teaching essentially darkness in the form of light, he is twisting the light. He's going, look at me, I'm light. I love Jesus. Buy my Bibles. See how much I love Jesus? We didn't make America pray again. While spreading falsehoods, lying, deceit, all pretending to be truth. So this is a very nefarious way. This is why Christianity is one of the Archon's greatest weapons. Christianity is a false light, posing as the light. It is a system of darkness and a system of enslavement promulgated by archonic forces. It is a system of the Antichrist, but it slaps the name Jesus on there and wears crosses like they're holy, when in fact, in many cases, it is the opposite of what Christ was actually trying to teach. And it wraps people in a system of enslavement. Now, this is very nefarious because it's not blatant. It goes, oh yeah, we love Jesus. We're all about Jesus. We're all about helping people. And then does the exact opposite. But it tricks, it fools many people. Many people are fooled by this. It's an illusion. And so it says the Archon came with the Archon. Oh no, I read that part. Then the time came until the child had grown up, meaning Jesus. When he had come to his maturity, then the Archons sent the imitator, the Archon of the West, as an imitator to that man Jesus, in order that they might know our great power. So basically, this Archon of the West studies Jesus and his teachings and becomes an imitator. So anyone promoting this false consciousness is an Antichrist. Just like anyone who truly awakens and spreads Christ consciousness is a Christ. So it's not about one particular figure. Antichrist consciousness is a twisted form of awareness. Now, what kind of twisted form of awareness? Well, here's the thing. It can take place on many different levels. For example, Christianity itself is Antichrist consciousness. Human beings get caught in a twisted form of consciousness, where Christ is no longer about self-liberation, it's about worshiping some dude so you don't burn in hell for eternity, and that you're a dirty, rotten sinner. Where in the Gnostic text, Jesus was like, there's no such thing as sin. You can become misaligned, but when you're aligned, you realize where you really came from and that you're a being of light and you can become like me. And so the Antichrist twists that pattern into what? Christianity. So Christianity is a form of Antichrist consciousness because it twists a message into something that is no longer liberating, but enslaving. It is a system of enslavement. That's what it is. And this can be taken on many different levels, though. It's not just relegated to Christianity. Think of it in terms of popular spirituality, like TikTok spirituality. It's all about, they might say they're about unity and seeing connectedness, but they also throw in things like, oh, love and light all the time, or you have to destroy your ego. And it becomes a twisted form of consciousness, an Antichrist consciousness, because if you destroy your ego, you destroy the part of yourself that is able to reflect and make conscious decisions. If you are all about love and light all the time, then you oppress your inner darkness, which just builds up and builds up and builds up and controls you, possesses you from the background. So you can see there are different levels to this. Antichrist consciousness corrupts consciousness. It can corrupt at the level of self-awareness through something like Christianity and actively block Christ consciousness to not allow someone to be able to get to the state where that aspect of the psyche or structure in the psyche can ever develop because it blocks it. It can also, Antichrist consciousness can manifest in toxic spiritual systems that actually, say that they're about unity and connectedness, but actually aren't, and are all about, oh, love and light all the time, destroy your ego, or manifest a mansion. I want to say again, there's nothing wrong with having money and buying nice things. That can actually be a part of a spiritual practice, because guess what? That can help you actualize yourself and help you promote certain goals and even just enjoy and live comfortably. But it's done in such a way in these spiritual communities where it's no longer a means to an end. It's an end unto itself. It's not about increasing quality of life and helping and achieving goals, having enough time for self-development. Instead, it becomes about, I just want more money, just because. I don't need more. I just want more for no reason. And this idea of so you see how it operates at different levels. As a spiritual community, you have this idea of just like, oh, manifesting abundance. Again, no problem with that. But if that is your main focus of spirituality, then it's an issue. So like with me and my work, obviously, I make money from ad revenue, from awesome supporters like you guys and people who donate with the super chats or become members. But I didn't create this YouTube channel because I'm like, oh, I want to make money. No. If I did that, I sure as hell wouldn't be talking about Gnosticism or philosophy. That's extremely hard to make go viral and very difficult to get people to pay attention to. So I wouldn't have chosen that if my goal was to make money. But money is important because it allows me to afford a nice microphone, a good quality camera, lighting, so that I can ultimately reach more people. So you see, it's not a means to an end, or it is a means to an end, not an end unto itself. This can operate. So you have this, the spiritual community, or not all the spiritual community, but toxic forms of the spiritual community who are all about, oh, manifesting abundance. And now spirituality is all about making money. You can, but it shouldn't be the main focus, the main goal. Now, but that can also manifest at a lower level of consciousness as well, that Antichrist pattern. Think of it in terms of prosperity gospel. So prosperity gospel is very, very popular among Christians and is promoted by a lot of televangelists like, who's that guy that's absolutely out of his mind? Kent. No. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I'm just going to look up crazy pastor, and I bet he'll be the first one that comes up. Kenneth Copeland, not Kent, Kenneth Copeland. I was getting that confused with Kent Hovind. Don't even get me started on Kent Hovind. But I'm speaking about Kenneth Copeland. He teaches prosperity gospel. And prosperity gospel is extremely nefarious. It more or less, it goes something like this. When you are in alignment with God, God's going to bless you with so much money, and so much money you're not even going to know what to do with it. But here's the thing. To show that you really love God, you need to tithe lots of money. So the idea, it's like a spiritual pyramid scheme where it's basically like, okay, if you give me X amount of money, God's going to give you 10 times that amount back. So now it's a horrible system. Not only the fact that that's so far away from what Jesus taught, it's not even funny, but you are telling this to people who probably don't have very much money. And so these people who already don't have much money, a good chunk of them probably don't have much money, they're going to give away more of their money because they believe God's going to bless them 10 times over or something. So you see, that's just one example of a twisted form of consciousness dealing with money as an end unto itself that can manifest at lower levels of consciousness, simple self-awareness in terms of prosperity gospel, or at even higher levels in terms of toxic spirituality that's all about manifesting abundance being the main priority and the main goal. And so just like you have a bunch of pastors that promote the Antichrist pattern and are antichrists, like Kenneth Copeland is an antichrist, you have a lot of spiritual gurus who are, not all of them, but some of them are antichrists promoting this false form of consciousness. And a lot of the times, just straight, flat out, completely manipulating and conning people. So this Antichrist pattern is a form of twisted consciousness that blocks you from achieving higher states or from seeing things clearly or dividing you against yourself or aligning your priorities in the wrong direction so that it serves someone else rather than you. You become compliant. You become susceptible to manipulation. But it does so in the name of Jesus. That's what defines Antichrist consciousness, okay? It's not just a bad form of consciousness. It's a form of consciousness that poses as truth. In the name of Jesus, or in the name of spirituality, in terms of the source. But it's not actually. It's promoting a twisted, limited, false version of itself. So it's not about any individual person. A guru can be an antichrist, a preacher, a pastor, they can be antichrists. And these are all systems of archonic enslavement that keep minds trapped at a lower state of awareness. And so how do we fight against this? Well, Jesus himself says in the Bible, Jesus says, "Think not that I have come to bring peace to the world, but I have come to bring a sword." And that sword that Jesus brings and wields is the sword of truth. The sword that cuts through illusion. The sword that cuts through false consciousness. Again, Jesus says, "Think not that I have come to bring peace, but a man's household will be the battleground," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but something along those lines. Your own household will become your battleground. Son will be against father. Daughter will be against mother. What does this mean? Why would Jesus cause this? Well, it's because what happens when you achieve a higher state of consciousness and see things clearly and others don't. You've probably felt this in your own family. maybe they're, hardcore supporters of some toxic ideologies, and you try them to get to see the truth, but no, they're against you and are opposed to you. That's what that means. Jesus also said that I came to set fire on the world, and I wish that it were already burning. This is again in the canonical Bible, not some Gnostic text, in the canonical Bible. Gnostic texts are great, but sometimes, if someone's coming from a Christian background, they haven't yet understood why Gnosticism is important. But even if you just look at the Bible, Jesus says, I have come to set fire in the world, and that everyone will be salted with fire, and that you will be baptized not only by the Holy Spirit, but by fire. So what that means is fire has always been a symbol. No, not always, probably, but fire is a symbol, an ancient symbol for transformation. Because what does fire do? It burns away illusion. It makes transformation possible. It makes false forms of understanding burn into ash so you can rise again like a phoenix. It's about transformation. The old world must be turned to ash, metaphorically speaking, so that a new can be born. The Antichrist consciousness must be transformed into Christ consciousness. And so that's why this is so key and so important. And why I say that you're in the middle of this. You're in the middle of this because unless you have, I'm sure a great number of individuals that do watch my channel have already achieved Christ consciousness and have become Christs if you're out there transmitting awakening, maybe through your art or posts or books or videos or whatever. But the key is you're in the middle of this because you don't want that to become corrupted. You don't want it to become corrupted. And for someone who hasn't achieved that level of consciousness, they're in this war between people trying to transmit Antichrist consciousness to them and others trying to transmit Christ consciousness to them. And guess what? There's a hell of a lot more people transmitting Antichrist consciousness than it is Christ consciousness. That's why what we do here on this channel is make that go viral. We are literally making go viral what the church tried to bury and burn out of existence for thousands of years. But now that fire that they tried to use to burn us down, we wield the fire of transformation to transform ourselves, each other, and the world. So that's the real meaning of Christ and Christ consciousness and the Antichrist and Antichrist consciousness, and why you must always be wielding that sword of truth that cuts through illusion and allows for discernment, knowledge, and understanding. The archons wield many weapons, one of their greatest weapons being Christianity. But our weapon that cuts through all the bullshit of archonic influence is the sword of truth, the sword of light, the sword of the Logos. And so always keep that in mind. There are these forces everywhere that are constantly trying to ensnare you. Don't let that happen. Wield that sword of truth. That's your sword. It's not just Christ's sword. It's your sword. It's our sword. And it's the greatest weapon that we have. So my friends, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of that. As always, let me know in the comments if you made it until the end. I'm always curious how many people actually do. And I pay attention to your comments. And I see all of you who say that you did. And I think that's awesome. I appreciate it. And it shows that this is really important to you. And that's what matters to me. That you understand the message here and understand how important it is. And so we can spread it like fire across the earth. That being said, make sure you hit like, share, and subscribe so we can spread it everywhere. Helps out a lot. I appreciate it. If you want to help out even more, become a member. You get access to a lot of great stuff like free downloads on inner transformation, alchemy, Kabbalah, rituals, etc. And Did I say members only videos? I don't think I did. You get access to a ton of members only videos and helps out the channel. You can also check out my books. I'm a Neogenian and have written a 5-part book on the Neogenian system. If you're interested in starting understanding what that system really is, start with this book. But if you're interested in understanding more about the analog all, what we talked about today, then start with this book. It discusses all awareness and hyper awareness. It's called Psychogenesis. It's actually the last book in my series. So either start with the first or the last, the alpha or the omega, whichever one. If you're interested in just understanding what this system is and how to understand the nature of reality, start with this one, or this one if you want to understand how the psyche develops higher states of awareness and consciousness. But that's just if you want to. You don't have to buy shit. You can support completely free. I have a Spotify channel. Go follow me on Spotify. Completely free to do. Helps out a lot. We're continuing that blaze over there on a new platform, and we are reaching tens of thousands of people over there. So help us grow over there. Look in the description, the links to all of those things, my books, my Spotify channel, and membership, all that. It's in there. Check it out. And I'm going to give a big shout out to everyone who supports. I appreciate you very much. You guys are amazing. And I want to give a big shout out especially to, and remember, if you haven't seen if your name's not up here yet, I apologize. I haven't updated this list yet. I will soon. I've been very busy working on certain projects lately. But big shout out to Renaissance, Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Dallas, Nusalina, Eric, Soul, Vivian, Tornado, Banshee, Pop Out, Hyper Saiyan, Chris, and everyone else. My name is Morgue, and I am Neogenian. Ad Astra.